So my name is Chad Witko. I am a specialist in avian biology for the National Audubon Society. Specifically, I work for the National Science Team, and within that, the Migratory Bird Initiative. So I've been at Audubon now for 6+ years. I started in 2019, entirely with the Migratory Bird Initiative. Although, 20 years prior, 25 years prior, I think it would be, no, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. It was like 15 years prior. I worked for Audubon and Project Puffin. I heard Laura mention Hog Island, but I was a naturalist on the Hardy boat. So I had earlier ties with Audubon in my career. But yeah, so I've been with Audubon now for 6 years, and most of my work is with MBI. A lot of it is centered around the Explorer. So I was one of the people who helped get it put together and launched. And one of the things we're doing now is, we're trying to make sure people feel comfortable with the tool, understand it, and can think about how to apply it, in their day-to-day lives or with their work or their conservation efforts. Beyond that, a lifelong birder. I live in southeastern Vermont, and I live here with my partner and our 4-year-old daughter. So, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. Just to confirm, or Laura, you guys can see the presentation. Is that up on the screen?
Yep,
Yes.
looks great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming and for inviting me to this. I'm really excited to share about our Bird Migration Explorer that Audubon was a part of. And I heard through the messaging that some of you are familiar with this. Some of you might have seen some of this already. So some of it might be redundant in a slight sense for those that have been through a similar presentation, but I'm hopeful that by the end it'll really build upon what you've already learned. As you can see here, we've titled this presentation as an intro to the Bird Migration Explorer, expanding awareness and confidence. And so I hope by the end, everybody will feel a little bit more aware and confident, not only in how to use the tool, but also how it came together, understanding kind of the bones of it, because I think that's really important when we think about trying to utilize it to its capacities and maybe develop some questions that maybe the Explorer can help us answer. So I hope by the end you guys will feel both more aware and more confident. So, okay. So this is today's agenda. So today's agenda, we're going to do a quick kind of welcome and objectives on what we'll talk about. We're going to do a fairly sizable section about the Bird Migration Explorer. So everybody has kind of that background that, we're all kind of coming in at the same level when we move forward. We'll talk about applications and use cases and show some examples across different kind of buckets of work that Audubon has used the Explorer for. And then we'll talk about how you or anybody can stay engaged with the Explorer and feel supported in using it and getting assistance as needed. We will try to do a live walkthrough on the Explorer at the end, which I think will be helpful. We, of course, want to leave time for Q&A, so we'll have to kind of balance out and see where things fall. I will say that the Explorer, it is a large browser-based tool that uses kind of a lot of computing power. So sometimes doing live walkthroughs while also being on Zoom and things can sometimes make it a little laggy. So we'll have to balance and see how that works while we're on. But hopefully through all of this, at the end, you'll feel like you're in a better spot. Okay, so welcome and objectives. So just a quick thing here that I want to start by recognizing some of Audubon's staff behind the Bird Migration Explorer, the development and the success of it. One of the main Audubon, I guess, groups of staff that helped with this, obviously, is the Migratory Bird Initiative staff who are mentioned here. We've had some other people that were with MBI. They've transitioned out or changed roles. One of those is Melanie Smith, who was kind of the lead in developing the Bird Migration Explorer. She's still with Audubon, but she's now moved over to digital products. So she's a staff member there, where she's product director for science and conservation. But Melanie's still, of course, very integral in the success of the Explorer. And so across our team, we have kind of a range of folks who are, ecologists and comm specialists, people that have done a lot of work with tracking, people that are, expert spatial folks and mapping and geospatial stuff, all of which, is needed for the Explorer's success. Now, there's other Audubon staff who aren't listed here that were involved, and you can find out more about them on the Explorer. We have an About section. We'll touch upon a little bit throughout the presentation. So as I said, the purpose of this webinar is to really kind of raise awareness and build confidence in using the Bird Migration Explorer, show how it supports the flight plan, which is obviously important towards Audubon's work and success in bending the bird curve, and of course, how it intersects with certain things like education, research, policy. Now, for ourselves in Audubon, we are starting up a series of these webinars, starting with these kind of foundational trainings. The idea is to build on, getting people kind of leveled up to this 101 level of what the Explorer is and how it comes together. And then future sessions, we hope we'll be able to kind of dive in to some of these kind of areas of work that we list here, such as research or policy. So we hope that there will be a whole series. We're having a new training plan that we're kind of slowly rolling out, and this is part of this process. And eventually, for people internally and external to the organization, we will have some more resources and updated resources, including how-to, videos and such, where people can access those resources and learn more about how to use it, particularly with some of the updates that have happened since the first resources were developed. So I'm going to try and throw up this poll. So we have a poll here. Let's see. Bear with me. Some reason, let's see. Here we go. So we have a poll here that'd be great if you guys would be willing to answer this if you're able to on your devices, which is, how have you used the Bird Migration Explorer? So click all that apply. Have you primarily used it for audience engagement, research, conservation, policy, personal curiosity, or I haven't used it yet? All of these are very valuable answers for us to understand. So I see some stuff rolling in here. We have, I don't know how many people are on the call, but we have about, let's see, 11 people have answered so far, 12.
Yep, and I think we have 16 altogether. I cannot do it.
Sure, that's fine. And we don't have to have all 16 answer. What
There's
this is showing though is that, there's been a small subset that have used it for research and conservation. Most people have used it for personal learning and curiosity, which is absolutely one of the things that we want to use it for. And then there's a whole bunch of the folks on the call that said that they haven't used it, and that's great. Like, there's no shame in not having used it yet. I think it's a great tool, and we're certainly happy to help usher that through. So I can just share this real quick.
All right, and you can add one more to audience engagement. And I think you could only pick one.
Yeah, I forgot to mention to you that you can put, when I did it before, it was multiple, but this is great. This is really helpful. So thank you all for that. Okay. All right. So here's one of the meatier sections of today's presentation, which is kind of about the Bird Migration Explorer. So the Bird Migration Explorer was launched in 2022 in September, so it's already been 3 years. And it's an award-winning, free, interactive platform. It's available in both English and Spanish, where it's referred to as Explore Aves. And it's used to explore bird migrations, hemispheric connections, and conservation challenges. Now, while Audubon clearly played an obvious and important role in the development and, of course, its ongoing maintenance and success, we want to mention that, this was launched in 2022 with support from 10 founding partners. So these partners are listed here, many of which come from the conservation sector, but there's others, including Blue Raster and some others that aren't here, which contributed kind of to the technological side of its development. Now, my primary role in working with the Explorer was discovering and acquiring the tracking data that kind of is a centerpiece for the Explorer. So obviously, I want to highlight that there's been hundreds of data holders and institutions that have contributed tracking data. And there's over 700 studies, I think was the last count we had, that kind of make up that part of the Explorer. So all the people that aren't kind of the founding partners, but have graciously shared their data. They're a big part of how we've been so successful with developing this tool. And then finally, I want to say while we're here, when we're on the Explorer, we'll see that Audubon has a logo there. It appears fairly prominently. Obviously, this is an Audubon presentation right now, but we want to make sure that when we talk about the Bird Migration Explorer, particularly when we're putting out messaging around it, that it's not Audubon's Bird Migration Explorer, but we refer to it as kind of like an entity unto itself, that it is the Bird Migration Explorer, because it is something that's been put together from all these partners, and we do not have sole ownership of that platform. So this is a really important slide for understanding what's on the Explorer. So at the heart of the Explorer really is this impressive volume of data, and there's this really amazing, remarkable process for displaying all this data. So currently, the Bird Migration Explorer consolidates data for 456 species across three main buckets of data. So the first main bucket of data that we have are our foundational range maps. These are the maps that basically all the animations and things move over top of. Now, these have come in and been sourced from eBird and BirdLife International, and we have a really cool kind of derived process for this from my colleagues and some others. And it's really neat that we get this process going. The maps are developed, and then they also go through an expert review process. So I'm one person that has reviewed all these maps. I've reviewed every species maps several rounds now. So, 1,000, 1,500 maps have kind of gone through me over time. And this is to make sure that the range maps are up to date, accurate, biologically sound. And we think that these are some of the best kind of full hemispheric maps for these migratory species that's out there. So we feel really, really happy with those. Outside of those maps, and kind of unsurprisingly, the focal point of the Explorer, it's kind of nice that it's nested here in the center, is our tracking data that comes in. So nearly half of all the species that we have on the Explorer have some type of tracking data, that is some type of pathway data. So I forget who was on the call had mentioned about tracking. I think they said shorebirds and black skimmers, maybe in Long Island. These are the types of data that we can bring into the Explorer and show these amazing animations, these amazing maps. So some species like the American white pelican here or sandhill crane, there's just an impressive volume of data. But some species, only have a few tracks. And then there's other species that are not tracked. There's huge gaps in the tracking community for North America's breeding birds. So there's still a lot of species we don't have in, whether they've not been tracked by the scientific community, or maybe those data haven't been shared yet with us. But we're constantly trying to update that. The next kind of main bucket of data that builds the Explorer is our connectivity data. So as remarkable as the tracking data are, I think they're a highlight for everybody. The volume of data that makes the connectivity data, which also shows so many cool features on the Explorer. It's amazing. There's nearly 7 million connection points on the Explorer, from things like bird banding lab data, MODIS data, which we get directly from Birds Canada and the Bird Genoscape project. And so there's over 400 species that we have connections data for. So that is a huge portion of the Bird Migration Explorer. Now, with this volume of data, it's really not shocking that we've had a lot of people coming to our platform and seeing, what it is that we have and diving into the joy of our migratory birds. And we've had a large amount of users use the Explorer to date. So over 850,000 users have used it in the 3 years, and it's estimated about 10 to 20,000 each month come into the Explorer. When we look at our engagement on the little graph here, we see some spikes. Those usually time when we put out other email campaigns for things like World Migratory Bird Day. But in short, the Bird Migration Explorer is a fantastic tool. It's got great reach and impact. But obviously, judging by the poll, right? Like there's a number of people who are kind of closer to this in their work or their interests and have not used it. So we find that there's a lot of room to grow. So it's important to note that the Bird Migration Explorer is not a static product. It is not quote unquote finished. I mean, it is, of course, developed to where it is, but we're constantly doing updates. So we have data updates that occur each spring with the idea that these would be pushed through the technological processes that we have and that they will go live on the Explorer at the end of the spring, usually by the end of June. And then these updates include things to our tracks and connection data, anything that we get in the intervening kind of months, June to June, we push those through. Then of course there's other data that we get in that go through a rotation of updates, and then they get synced up at the end of the year. So ideally, every June, July, the Explorer is kind of a new product in a sense, and that it has new data and visualizations. So that said, here are a few of the recent updates. Now, it was kind of mentioned to me coming into this that some of you might have seen talks by Jill Deppy or Bill DeLuca. And so, those talks are probably very similar in a lot of ways, but there have been updates probably since you guys have seen them talk about this. So in FY25, here are kind of some of the more important updates. So the first is we partnered with the Bird Genoscape project, and we've added breeding subranges for genetically distinct populations of different birds. Now we had a cohort of 12 species initially, and you can find some of these on the Bird Migration Explorer. Things like Swainson's thrush and Wilson's warbler are two of the ones that come to mind. We also have the new ability for our location connections map. You can now filter by the technology that is used to record those connections. So, if you're interested in GPS data or banding data, genetics data, you can filter that through to give you more flexibility in the connections that you're finding. And then the final one is our automated location setting. So there's now a setting when you use the Explorer, excuse me, it'll tailor the location to your location. So that way what you see is kind of relevant to where you live or where you are. You can always turn that off if you don't want that for any personal reasons, or if you want a broader kind of perspective of the Explorer. And when we do the live demo, if things are working okay with connections, I'll touch upon where some of this lives. But basically, when you're on the Bird Migration Explorer, there's a menu button in the top right. It's these three stacked lines. Some people refer to it as the hamburger menu. And when you click that, there's an option for About the Bird Migration Explorer. And then you'll see all of these various kind of pages that come up on our About area of the platform. So there's a section at the end that's about what's new, and this is where we keep all of our updates. So that said, just a little bit of a plug, moving forward, because we are trying to continually update this data, but we are still discovering and acquiring new tracking data. So if you are somebody that tracks birds in North America using kind of these standard things like satellite or GPS tags, or light or barometric geolocator tags. We'd love to hear from you if you'd be interested in sharing and getting your data on the platform. We do use MODIS data. I know a lot of people use MODIS data or are involved in MODIS studies, but we get those directly from Birds Canada. So Birds Canada gives us kind of like a MODIS data dump with all that data. So if you do something with MODIS, that should come through a different process and it wouldn't be so one-on-one with someone like myself. Now, when we think about Audubon's work and bending the bird curve, it's important to note that the Bird Migration Explorer, it really is more than just a beautiful and visually engaging tool and platform. It's something that, through its design, which was, very carefully done, and its applications, that it supports the flight plan and all of Audubon's kind of major milestones in that flight plan, those listed here, as well as some of our strategies and initiatives, including science innovation. Now, one of the things that we do is we have for Audubon, Audubon's work, we have a use case Airtable, so like basically like a database, where folks can through a form tell us what their use cases are of the Explorer and assign it to the various milestones. And so we kind of are building up this library of how is the Explorer being used. And that's really important for MBI's work because it enables us to effectively support the flight plan moving forward. It shows us kind of clearly like where our work is. It's kind of similar to, if you were a conservation person doing conservation work, you want to be able to have something measurable on the back end to kind of show how that work is impactful for what you're doing. One thing I kind of want to go back and say that, because I did miss this, and I want to be clear about this for the folks who are new to the Explorer, is that the Explorer is a browser-based tool. It's a browser-based kind of platform. It is not an app, so you can't go to the App Store and put that app on your phone, but it is a browser-based thing that you can find across any of your devices. So if you use a laptop, a desktop, an iPad, or your mobile device, you can access the Bird Migration Explorer through your browser of choice, whether it be Chrome, Firefox, Safari. So it's basically like going to a website. And we do have a mobile version of this if you're on mobile. It's kind of got some reduced functionality just to fit kind of the device a little bit better. But yeah, that's how you would access it. So if you're not familiar with it, you would go to birdmigrationexplorer.org, for instance, on your browser, and that's how you'd access the platform. Okay. So now that we kind of have a basis for the platform itself, we're going to look a little bit at some of the applications and use cases of the Explorer. And this is really a great section for those who want to think about how they can use it in their own life and work, whether that's, if there's somebody that works for Audubon or integrated with a chapter, or if they're involved in other conservation or education stuff outside of Audubon. Here's some kind of applications and use cases just to kind of show the breadth of how this platform has been used. So first up, we have our Audubon centers, which kind of links to our community building milestones. So the Bird Migration Explorer provides kind of locally relevant content, as you'll see when we get to the demo, and that helps engage visitors kind of to our conservation actions, right? So if they're at a center, they can help tie in the conservation actions to where they are and connect them to other places across the Americas. So we've collaborated with a group of education staff to create a collection of 6 flyway scale stories. Those are available in English and Spanish. Now, I don't have any of my colleagues here to share some of these links with you today. It'd be too much back and forth for me to have this kind of go smoothly. But we can try to get you some of these links afterwards because we have a collection of that. So anything that's mentioned here, we can get those links to you at some point. But we have these great flyway scale stories, and these showcase kind of the extraordinary journeys of bird migration. So of course they use visuals from the Explorer, and then each story kind of follows the species throughout the year, and it shows how it connects the hemisphere and the challenges it faces along the way. So these types of stories obviously can be displayed at centers or featured on center web pages. So across the centers, you see here in the photo on the right, the John James Audubon Center was the first to pilot an exhibit, which introduced visitors to the Explorer. So the exhibit kind of has these small kiosks with static displays that guide visitors in navigating the Explorer and learning how to use it. So insights that we've gained from this are now helping to develop interactive Explorer programs in other centers internally and externally. Speaking of external centers, we also have partner centers. So we've have some centers that are tied to some of our partners that we worked with. So in partnership with the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, we co-created 3 educational displays that are up at the Birdhouse at the Smithsonian's National Zoo, which is just a really cool exhibit from what I could see. I've never been there, but I've seen some videos and photos. And the recently renovated birdhouse kind of features these aviaries, and each of them kind of highlight these key conservation issues and ties them to various uh, ecosystems which are kind of critical to migratory birds. So things like the prairie potholes, Delaware Bay, which is kind of closer to where some of you all are, continentally speaking. And then there's a South American bird-friendly coffee farm as part of that display. So these displays, they feature the Explorer, they feature maps from the Explorer, and they help highlight the conservation challenges that these birds are facing along the way. So, somebody mentioned bobolinks. So visitors can explore the remarkable journeys of birds like bobolinks, obviously, which depend on healthy grasslands. We can look at oven birds, such as depicted here, which connects people, from, kind of east central North America to kind of bird-friendly coffee plantations in Mexico. And of course, wood thrush, which is another popular species for many of you guys, and talk about the challenges of light pollution. Another way that we've used the Explorer is to kind of celebrate local conservation efforts. And what we've done is we've kind of built more story maps and kind of components to kind of like these web applications that have these great visualizations. And it kind of turns stories into guided narratives. And this has been great for some key audiences at Audubon centers and sanctuaries such as the Rainy Wildlife Sanctuary, which is shown here. So for that, we created a story map collection that honors the sanctuary's caretakers, uses data from the Explorer, and it kind of highlights the importance of migratory birds, to this place, while also outlining kind of plans for landscape restoration moving forward. So we've done a few of these, and they've been really great, and the Explorer has been instrumental in that. Now, I will say that some of the differences you'll see across some of these displays is that some of these displays are very much uh, taken directly from the Bird Migration Explorer, like the imagery of the maps are very much like one-to-one, and then others, like you might see here, are kind of more derived from the data that comes in. So they're essentially powered by the Explorer, although they might look visually a little bit different. Now, education is another thing that I think all of us understand is kind of a cornerstone of Audubon's mission. And so we've found that the Explorer really is this great and powerful tool that sparks curiosity and understanding about bird migration. So we work with initiatives like Audubon Adventures, which is a science-based environmental education curriculum. It's for grades 3 through 5 primarily, and it helps connect young people, families, and teachers to the natural world. And we found that the Bird Migration Explorer can be a really great way for folks to do that. And the Explorer really does kind of shine in those settings. So we found that, it enables students to explore important questions like where does a particular bird species migrate to? Why does it migrate at all? How do we know this? So it enables students to kind of investigate these questions about migrations, flyways. They can look at real data, and it enables them to kind of level up their creativity about this too. So, there's been some programs where students have created little postcards, travel postcards for from the perspective of our migratory birds. So they can choose a migratory species, and they can, and looking at the Explorer, they can kind of create these postcards thinking about where that bird travels, which is a great way to think about storytelling. It's a great way for kids to engage at that level. Now, this is something I think that some folks here might be interested in. This is a tool that we developed more on the conservation side of applying the Bird Migration Explorer. This is the Southern Wings online full annual cycle conservation guide. It's kind of a mouthful. But this was done together with AFWA, so the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and also other kind of conservation entities like the American Bird Conservancy, Georgetown University, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So what we've done is we developed this tool, this guide, and its intention is to help those state fish and wildlife agencies identify where kind of their priority bird species spend other parts of the annual cycle, so like outside of where they're located. And this is to help them have more efficient and impactful um, conservation work. Resources are finite in the conservation field, obviously, and maybe even more so today than ever. So this helps them kind of think about how to be more strategic with those finite resources. So kind of each page, which kind of see some of the elements here, those pages are largely derived from the Explorer outputs that we were able to develop, as well as stuff from the Cornell Lab Ornithologies, their eBird status and trend information, which we also utilize in our products as well. And so this is kind of a one-stop shop for state agencies. It helps them connect to kind of the science that guides probably investments in Latin America and the Caribbean. So it really can help benefit their species of greatest conservation need, for instance. So the species that matter to a state agency. So this is a great way to find where those birds go, what other agencies and entities are doing work in those areas, and it can help make those connections. And I think it's true for Audubon state and regional offices as well, not just kind of like the Fish and Wildlife agencies. So it's a great tool that we think is really worth looking at. And then another way that we've kind of done some conservation work is we've used the Explorer, the Bird Migration Explorer, to help understand how species are exposed to conservation challenges throughout their full annual cycles. And so with enough time, I know we're pushing it close, on the Explorer, there is a conservation challenges section of the Explorer, which is shown here. And so we're able to take the data that is pushed out the back side of it, and take that in the front side and kind of do some analyses. And so what we found in a recent paper that was published in Global Change Biology, I was one of the authors, not the lead author, but one of the supports, is that fall migration, for instance, is the most dangerous season for North America's warblers. So we were able to take kind of the conservation challenges side of the Explorer, the data that powers that, and do an analysis on our kind of populations and trends of warblers and find out, what are some of the threats for these species that they're facing, and the challenges. So things like light pollution, agriculture, and even forest management. So great way that the Explorer has been utilized there. Now, for anybody that's more interested in the policy side of things, the Bird Migration Explorer has helped in things like the Migratory Birds of the Americas Conservation Enhancement Act of 2023, so increasing funding for conservation outside of the US, where that act was aiming to increase authorized funding from 6.5 million per year to 20 million, ramping up even further over 5 years to 25 million. And so our policy team met with representatives out of Alaska to discuss this legislation. They've used these maps like the Bird Migration Explorer's Blackpoll Warbler map to kind of illustrate the connections between Alaska and the rest of the hemisphere. And so Representative Peltola of Alaska became an original co-sponsor of the bill, and they introduced it to the House, which was a major goal for Audubon. So the Bird Migration Explorer can certainly help with policy work. Now, I do want to say for anybody that's using the Explorer for any of these things, it's important to say that we want you to use the Explorer. We want you to dive in, apply it, share it. But we do want you to know that there are some attributions that we want you to be clear about and citations. So when you're using the Bird Migration Explorer, we encourage you to first look at Audubon's terms of use. Again, I can't put the link in right now, but we can share that later on. But if you look at Audubon's terms of use, just like a Google search, you'll find that. So it tells you kind of how to locate, sorry, it tells you how to like uh, properly cite and give attribution for the Explorer. But basically, if you're putting it out there, we want to make sure that, we have QR codes that link to the Explorer when possible. We want to make sure that our partners are listed on the Explorer, showing that partner logo bar, which you'll see. And, you know, when in doubt with all of this, you can always contact me or contact the Migratory Bird Initiative, and we can help you work through that proper attribution. And then also, again, when you're on the Explorer, you'll see that there's a way to properly cite the Explorer. So it shows you how to add that citation in, which is good. And then kind of coming towards the end of this is kind of just a look at that use case library. So, folks in Audubon, they're doing Audubon work. They're able to fill out a form, which helps bring in all those use cases that we then can have a sense of like how it's being used and applied, such as those use cases that I was showing earlier. And then this is the form. And then this will be the final thing, and hopefully we can get a few minutes in on the Explorer. So just about engagement and support. Um, within Audubon, we have a science services request form. So folks are able to request it if there's any types of maps that we can help them develop, like we've done for partners. That's not always possible just due to capacity on the team and other priorities, but we do have ways that folks can properly request that. When you are on the Explorer, there is also a section for learning resources. So again, when you go to the About side of the platform, you can see here there's a whole learning resources page where you can find YouTube video links, which are basically kind of like live walkthroughs and kind of how the Explorer is built. You can find resources for young explorers. You can find tips for using it, and then, of course, frequently asked questions. And then at the bottom of that page, it's important to note that if you have any feedback on the Explorer, we have a feedback form, so you can let us know if you have any feedback, you have praise for the Explorer, or if you encountered some type of error or bug. So there's a way to reach out to us through a form on the Explorer if you don't remember how to contact us. Which, speaking of which, here is the main way to reach us. So you can contact me directly. So chad.witko at audubon.org, or probably easier to remember, migratorybirds at audubon.org. And then within the ecosystem of Audubon, we use a Slack channel. So if anybody has access to the Slack that we use, we have a Bird Migration Explorer Slack channel. So it's a dedicated Slack channel for people to ask questions about the Explorer and reach out. And then finally, there's another Slack channel for migratory bird tracking. So MBI has a new migratory bird tracking program that's starting up, which is looking to kind of help coordinate tracking efforts across the organization. So Laura or Susan, I just want to ask now, that's the end of the slide deck. So I have about 10 minutes, it looks like. I don't know if we can go a little bit longer. I don't know how you want to prioritize a few minutes on the live demo versus Q&A. Just looking to get clarity on that before we go forward.
I think, this is Susan, I think we certainly can go a little bit longer, but let's see if there are any questions to start with, and
Sure.
depending on how many we might have, everybody's saying live demo in the
Yeah.
chat. Um,
Yeah.
so does anybody have any questions, just so that if we do run out of time, that we do have time to address some of those before we go to the demo. Anita,
Um,
you have a question? You can go ahead and unmute and ask that.
yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. And the other thing is, Brian Evans from the Migratory Bird, in the Smithsonian unit, he came to the Bobolink Festival this summer. And I was going to ask a question. Is there a way, do you get the data from that, from Smithsonian or Cornell? Does Cornell I'm confused on how you get your data because I have some specific bobbling questions, but I don't know who to ask.
Sure. So there's a lot of data that makes up the Bird Migration Explorer, and that's everything from range maps, right, to banding data, to genetic data, to tracking data, to MODIS data. I mean, there's a lot of data points that come in. Now, most of those, we've sourced out or have had partnerships with. So, like, we have a partnership with USGS and the bird banding lab to get in the bird banding data. So that's what makes up some of those connections maps, which we at time we'll take a look at. Um, I primarily work with the tracking data. So if somebody is putting a tracking device on a bird, that's the kind of the realm that I work with. Some of those data are available on public repositories. So those things like MoveBank or the USGS Alaska Science Center. There's a few things like that out there that hold data. Those data are publicly available, and we can access those data and use those data. The vast majority of those tracking studies for the species that are there, it's a process where I contact the researcher in an email, tell them about the Explorer, and kind of make an appeal to ask them, would you be interested in sharing your data for the Explorer? Or then they decide if that's something they want to do or can do at that time. And then if they can, they sign a data sharing agreement and get that data for us. We access, and this is something that if Erica was here, she would be much better to answer, my colleague Erica Knight. But we get data from Cornell as well, eBird status and trends data. That's part of it, with some of the abundant stuff. So it's kind of a wide variety of things. Now, I will say that all the data that we have, just for clarity, we can't distribute back out. So if you're looking at the Explorer and you're like, I would really like to do something with these data, can I get these data from you? We do not distribute the data. We're not kind of in the business of being like a third party to that. And largely it's because we have kind of like binding agreements with the data holders that say we won't do that. So the data remains in their control. So if there's a tracking study that you're interested in applying, you'd have to get that tracking data from them. However, there may be ways that we can facilitate derived products from the Explorer, such as maps or imagery, but that's kind of case dependent. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yes.
hopefully it does.
Thank you, Chad. We're going to go to Jennifer Wilson Pines.
Um, what I was interested in using it for is to create kind of personality profiles of different birds, particularly for the migration season when we're doing lights out
Mhm.
and pulling elements like, their migration map, a picture, a little description of the bird out of Explorer, and obviously the accreditation. So I would love to see how you do that.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So we can, if there's no other questions, when we do the kind of the demo, I can show you a little bit about that. But largely, if people want to do something from the Explorer, it's really kind of as simple for the most part. It's just like taking a screenshot of the Explorer and making sure that certain elements are featured within that. Again, like there might be opportunities where we do occasionally get approached to make kind of imagery that maybe is like a derived map where someone will be doing something and say, hey, we're doing this thing. Can we get a map of these data, and sometimes we're able to provide that. So that way it's, it's its own static image and not directly from the Explorer. But largely it's just kind of taking an image from the Explorer and putting it on.
And we have one more question from Linda on how Bird Migration Explorer is different from the MODIS migration dashboard, but I think that we may be able to actually see in the demo. So,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn it over to you. It looks like that's the last question for a demo. I'm happy to continue recording. If people need to drop, I will have a recording of the whole program. We'll be watching it with other people from other chapters during our weekend and evening hours. And
Great.
yeah, we'll turn it back over to you and see how this part goes.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes with also being on Zoom. Sometimes the two are in kind of direct competition for computing power, so sometimes it can be a little challenging. But this is the Bird Migration Explorer. When you arrive at the Bird Migration Explorer, again, you can arrive here on your browser. The first thing that you see is our home map. Now, I've already loaded this map. This is why you're seeing data coming on. Usually when you jump on it, it'll ask you to load it, but I loaded it ahead of time to try to save from any issues with that while we're on Zoom. But this is the home page, and this is what we call our migration journeys map. So what you see here, all these colored lines, these are all the data that come in. So in the bottom right-hand corner, under the data providers panel, it says this map shows tracks for 12,160 individual birds from 195 species and data generously shared by researchers from 448 studies. So this is kind of for the tracking data, this is really like all the data kind of put together. So each of these lines, the colored lines that you see is a tracked bird. Now I'll come back to this in a second. I do just want to kind of orient folks that the Audubon logo in the top left, that's the home button. So as you're exploring, if you're feeling lost, you want to come back, that button will take you here. And then there's three main map types. We have bird species maps, which are kind of our migration maps. We have our locations connections maps, and then conservation challenges. So there's kind of three pathways that are the main pathways to explore. Now you'll see up in the top right, it says Vernon, Vermont. It's loaded my location. So this is kind of now a little bit refined and custom to where I live. So I live in southeastern Vermont, just 5 minutes from the Mass border. And then again, here in the upper right is this hamburger menu, which is where you would access the About the Bird Migration Explorer page, which takes you to all those additional pages that help you learn about the Explorer. So when you're on the main map or you're on any of the subsequent maps, there's kind of similar features that kind of transfer through all of them. So the first is the map layers panel. And then well, I guess it's singular. This panel here is where you have the option to toggle on and off kind of the various elements. So we want these maps to be dynamic and kind of usable other than just kind of like a clear thing that's static, right? So you see here these migration pathways. So we can turn these on and off based on whatever birds we're interested in. So we could leave it on just waterfowl. So blue lines, as shown here, are tracks of waterfowl species. So things like, everything from puddle ducks and sea ducks and diving ducks to geese and swans. That's what's up here now. Obviously, Arctic tern is just holding over because I had it selected from before. But we can toggle these on and off as we want. We can zoom in, we can pan around, so it's movable. The data providers panel here in the lower right, you can expand this. This is a panel where everything is dynamic. So whatever features are on the Explorer that are showing, that is what the panel should be showing you for the available data. Now, the four arrows kind of pointing out, that's the zoom to extent. So that kind of takes you to the full extent of the map if you're ever curious about that. Of course, you can use the plus and minuses to zoom in and out. And then one of the best features here is this arrow up coming out of the square. This is a share feature. So if you want to share this map with your members, or you want to share it with a politician or somebody involved in policy, or somebody interested in conservation, you can do that from this button, and you can click this link and it'll take that link and copy it so you can share it elsewhere. Now, the important thing is because this map is dynamic, you can turn things on and off. If you want to show what you've kind of filtered to, that is, you've turned features off and zoomed into a certain place, say, you know, Long Island Sound area, and you want to show just water birds and waterfowl, or maybe even shorebirds, you can toggle those things on and off to where you want it, zoom into where you want it, and you can share that map exactly as you've created it by clicking this little icon, this little tick box here, that allows you to kind of include the specifics of that share. So if I were to click this, it would basically copy all the features that I've set to. Now, the final thing I want to just say when we're looking at all this is, there's thousands of tracks here. You can use these completely as an entry point to the Explorer's maps. You can just, move the mouse around, see what pops up, find it interesting, click it, and it'll take you to that page, such as the prairie falcon that's shown here. I want to show that what's cool about this is that the map, if you were to take that base map away, so the map of the hemisphere of North America and South America, the Caribbean, you would still see kind of the continents in kind of form, because it's really neat to see how just from 12,000 tracks, we can see where these birds are migrating and how that is shaped by the landscape or kind of major migratory pathways. The final thing to say about the map here is that it'll tell you what kind of technology is being used. So this is Doppler satellite technology. So it says it under the species name. And then how wide the band is about how precise the data is. So we have a snow bunting track here with light level geolocator. It's a much more imprecise tracking technology. So it has a much wider range kind of precision or error. So it's a really fun feature to move around. And then before I go to the next maps, I'll just say, again, if you're taking a screenshot of anything, look at the founding partners bars on the bottom and make sure that that's included, because those are the folks that help make this happen. So when we go to the bird species side of this is kind of like where a lot of people want to go. We find that we can search through our species that are on the Explorer, so you can find exactly what you want. We also have featured species teed up here. So we have 4 featured species at the top. These are species that have really amazing maps. They're really fun. They're a great entry point. So if you're learning how to use the Explorer, you can go there, because a lot of the features are going to be with those species. They're kind of like, I don't want to say tops, maps, but they're really great entry points. But you don't have to choose those. You can obviously choose whatever species you want, and you can either type it in as is, like you type in whatever species you're interested in, and it'll show up. You can filter these lists down by the different taxonomic groups. You can filter these lists by which technologies were used to track the birds. You can mix and match, so you can really dial it down. And we have, options for different conservation statistics. So, what are the population sizes? What's the climate vulnerability? And then which conservation challenges. So if you have a question that you're trying to ask and you're trying to understand which species do I want to look at a map for that fits these parameters, all of these filters at the top are really, really good for doing that. Now, you'll see here under the featured species, it says near my location. It's using my location to filter down already. So it's showing 197 species that are within this region. There's a cool copy to clipboard feature here, these two pieces of paper. If you click that, it says it's copied to your clipboard. So if you want to know the species near your location, you want a list of that, you want to put that somewhere, you can copy this and then you have it available to paste into a Word document or whatever you're working in. That's really helpful when you're trying to kind of maybe do something with stewardship or advocacy. And if something is impacting where you live, you can kind of filter this down as you need, get that list and use that list. And then part of this here is we can also filter this down by, which species near my location are in which times of the year, which months, or how abundant those are. So, for instance, I could do which species are in my area now through March. And I see it's 102 species on the Explorer that are there through this time. Now, one thing that was a question that when we presented this last week, I forgot to kind of talk about, but was asked afterwards is, what does it mean when it says tracked? So there's tree swallow tracked, but American goldfinch does not say that. What does that imply? So it means that on the Bird Migration Explorer, we have tracking data for that species on our platform. It does not mean that that species has never been tracked by science. So for instance, American crow does not say tracked, but I do know that there are some folks who have tracked American crows. We've just not gotten that data in for whatever the reason. So it's good to know when you're thinking about that, what that means, but it basically means as you're using the Explorer, you can see that. So I'm going to choose a species that we're probably all familiar with, and this is our American woodcock. This species came up in conversation today for me and someone else. So it's a map filled with a lot of data. And so each of these yellow orbs that you see are individually tracked birds, right? And so you can see that there's hundreds of these birds that have been tracked and put into the Explorer. Now, it's a lot to look at when you first get here if you've never seen the Explorer. So I'm going to pause this. So this is a feature you can do. You can pause the Explorer when it's moving, and you can take things in piece by piece. So the map layers panel on this page is much like the first page we saw where we could turn things on and off for different groups. It's just different data here. So we can see, we can turn on and off the birds that have been tracked if we want. There's also this cool feature you can turn on and off, which is Journey of a Tracked Bird. So this is basically showing kind of a ghosted footprint of all the tracked birds put together, kind of where they're moving, so you can just see that extent. We have abundance of this species. So these brown circles that are in these hexagons, this is relative abundance of the species. This comes from eBird. So if you are an eBird user, you have helped create these data. So while the tracked birds are moving back and forth, this is showing you relative abundance through time, which is a way of looking at how migration is moving across the landscape. And then, finally, we have our species range by season. So this is kind of showing you, our standard seasonal ranges. So summer, winter, and year round. And it's important to think about those ranges for our migratory species that cross the equator. This is kind of thinking about it from a boreal perspective. So obviously, when birds cross the equator, if it's blue, they're not there in the austral winter, they're there in kind of the boreal winter, so our winter season. And yeah, as this is going through, we can zoom in, we can pan in, and we can see the timing of these species when they move through. If that's too quick, you can pause it and you can slide it back and forth at your own speed. It's a really great way to see how birds are moving across the landscape. But that's not all that's here. There's some really cool maps that you can access. We'll access them differently, but you can access other maps for American woodcock, for instance. We have related stories on Audubon's website or related websites, and then conservation statistics. So it's a really great way to look at the migrations of species. The second of the three main map types is our locations maps. So these help you choose a location across the hemisphere. You can see where that location connects to other places in the hemisphere through migratory birds that have been tagged or banded or tracked. And so you can see here, this is my location. And you can see all the places across the hemisphere that Vernon, Vermont connects to through the data that's in the Explorer across the hemisphere. So obviously, like there's birds that have never been banded or tracked. They have their own connections that we just don't know. But for what we do know and what we have on, here's how the map kind of falls out. So you can see there's a color ramp. It shows you how my area connects to other hexagons by how many species. So you can see here that just by moving this around, we can get a sense of how many species my area connects to. Now, we'll come back to that feature in a second, but when you look on the left, you'll see that it shows you the tagged bird species for my area, so it's 130. You can see a list of where the birds have traveled from my location to through banding and tracking efforts. And you can see the country, how many species that is, and how many individual birds that is. So you can see there's a whole list here, all the way from obviously Canada and the US, down to Costa Rica, Peru, even Uruguay at the very end. So it's a really great way to basically take the map and kind of put it into kind of like an easy to read numerical fashion. Now it shows you some additional things that are really neat as well, which is what are the Audubon kind of entities near where I live. So you can see Southeastern Vermont Audubon, Audubon New York, right? So it's kind of taking in the region. And it also is a great way to see what are some of the other conservation sites. So here's a priority forest block that's listed. Now, I can explore this map and I can be like, wow, I'm really curious, like what number of birds are down to this place? And I can just explore and click. But if we're interested, I can choose a location. So I can say Miami, Florida. I can choose a secondary location. And then you can see here that Vernon, Vermont is connected to Miami, Florida through 13 species of tagged birds. And then it shows you what those 13 species are. And then it also shows you something a little bit different, which is the conservation site. So, before when it was just selected for Vernon, it shows the one priority kind of forest block. Here, it shows the conservation sites that my location is connected to in Florida through migratory birds. And this is a really, really cool way for folks when you're demoing this or showing this or you're trying to make an appeal, for folks to kind of understand how their area, their local area, has hemispheric importance, or why the areas that we might be targeting for conservation or stewardship or protection, why those areas are important to your local birds. So, we could think, for instance, there might be somebody talking about conservation of a protected area in Alaska, for instance, right? Like a national wildlife refuge. And some folks locally might say, well, yeah, that's cool, and I would love to help for that, but what is the impact for me? Like I have so much else to worry about locally with conservation or my life. And it's a great way to show those connections to say, hey, if you care about the birds in your area, they're using that area. And so if you want to see, these species moving forward, it might be a good way to make that connection for that entry point. I know we're short on time, but I'll do the final map type here, which is our conservation challenges maps. So conservation challenges, some of you might think, well, what is a conservation challenge? You might think about, okay, well, are these threats? Are these threats that we're thinking about? And the answer is kind of yes and no. So conservation challenges, we're very selective with the terminology we used. They're not just threats, they're also conservation opportunities. So living in Vermont, I think about the obvious one is thinking about forestry. So forestry might be a conservation threat in the way we think about that normally. For, say, a species out west, maybe it's a western warbler of some type, where if we're doing forestry in these areas, it can be a threat to that species because the habitat is no longer there. Whereas we think about forestry in New England, our forests here, a lot of them need forestry to help keep them healthy, to keep them kind of uneven aged. And it is a great way to conserve habitat or create habitat for species like black-throated blue warblers or golden wing warblers that need early successional forests. So we think about it as a challenge because it is something that is on a spectrum, and there's opportunities for conservation benefits. So here we have 19 different challenges, some of which have maps, some of which don't. It's important to realize that these maps, these conservation challenge maps, they show the footprint of the select human activity, and kind of how that is across the environment. It shows, you can see how that, connects, that footprint of, say, light pollution connects to the range of a species, but it doesn't show you the impact. So it's not saying that, hey, there's a darker circle here, that means that that species is more impacted here. It's not measuring impact. It's just kind of measuring kind of exposure to that challenge for that species. And so there's a whole range of different things here, from urbanization to agriculture, things like wind turbines and power lines, communication towers, forest management. Surface water management, all of these major things. But light pollution is the one that I think is a huge one, particularly when we think about some of the places across the East Coast, major metropolitan areas along the I-95 corridor, for instance. And so when we click on light pollution, the conservation challenge map, we can see here's the footprint of this this activity, this environmental challenge across the hemisphere. And we can see that for light pollution, it's in these places with more people along the coast. No surprise, right? So these maps are a great way to see how that is. Of course, we have descriptions for all of these, so these panels are always very helpful. And as you're going through this, on the left side, not only can you learn more about this map, what it is, you can see, and this is the important part, kind of the species that are exposed to this challenge. So of the 450 plus species on the Bird Migration Explorer, 360 species are exposed to this challenge in a meaningful way. And so we can load all these if we want, and we can scroll through, and we can choose something, for instance. So American redstart, kind of at the top, save time. This is a species that all of us are probably familiar with, in our favorite birding places in the spring. And as this loads up, we can see here how American redstarts are impacted. I should say not impacted, how they are exposed and intersect, that's the word I was looking for, with light pollution as a conservation challenge. And so, when we look at this, there's two kind of icons that we're seeing, or two elements of the icon. We have the abundance of the species. So as we zoom in, we can see like how big is that circle, right? How big that circle is how abundant that species is, just like it was on the other species maps. And then the color ramp is how exposed that species is to that challenge. So we'll come back and we'll pause it here in the kind of early parts of post-breeding migration for this species, and we can see that coming through like the New York metropolitan area, there are a lot of American redstarts, and their exposure to light pollution is very high. So this is a great way to kind of get at the question about like what is happening to a species as it migrates. And of course, those you saw it in the presentation for the warbler paper, how those histograms look. So we have this histogram at the bottom that shows it in kind of a different way, just collectively. So that's it. Those are the main maps. When you're here, you can, we're on the as you can see on the left, we're on American Redstart. We got there through a different way, but we landed here. You can go back to those other map types for that species. You can choose other conservation challenges for that species. If you want to look at urbanization, for instance. Yeah, so this is kind of a quick, and this is a connections map for that species. So not a locations map per se, but how American Redstart connections are across the hemisphere. So there's so many ways to explore the Bird Migration Explorer. And I hope that through this kind of quick run through, you have a better sense of what the different map types are and kind of maybe some of the questions you can get at.
Thank you so much, Chad. That was great. And I know, like, I always enter this through the climate site, like when you get all the information about a bird and how climate change is going to impact, and then there's links to exploring more through the Migration Explorer, to just kind of give the big picture of some of those challenges. Um, I did record for today. If you want to send me those links, when I
Yes.
share out the recordings, I'll include the listings, those links along with it for everybody as a follow-up.